Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. Good evening. On Spectrum tonight, unpacking the marriage and divorce bill. How different is it from the domestic relations bill that was rejected? 2 years ago, the Uganda Reform Commission redrafted the controversial domestic relations bill, making a number of changes, including giving it another name to become the Marriage and Divorce Bill of 2009. This bill is aimed at reforming and consolidating the law relating to marriage, separation, and divorce. Although well-intentioned, those opposing it still think its main aim is to empower women to unfairly grab property from men whom they married for that specific purpose. The proponents, on the other hand, insist that divorce is a realistic response to reality and spouses must have an equal stake when a marriage is dissolved. The quest for a better family law can be traced back to 1965, when a commission of inquiry into marriage, divorce, and the general status of women was undertaken, culminating in a report commonly referred to as the Kalema Report. Since then, draft bills have met with stiff resistance from different sections of society, with the most recent blow coming from religious leaders who rejected a clause seeking to have cohabitation recognized as a form of marriage after 2 years. The position of the religious leaders forced former Attorney General Edward Chidu Makubuye to withdraw the bill, which was almost being enacted by the 8th Parliament during its final days. Now that a new parliament is in place, promoters of this bill are relaunching a campaign to ensure that it is one of the first legislative business in the House to be dispensed with. However, there are fears that ignorance within the public and amongst opinion leaders may derail the bill, justifying the decision to have a series of debates to run for 3 weeks here on Spectrum each Wednesday to separate facts from fiction and to also confront realities and myths about this bill. Our guests tonight, Mr. Ngabirano, lecturer of family law at Makerere University, also partner at Development Law Associates. You're most welcome, Mr. Ngabirano.
Thank you very much. Good evening, listeners.
We also have Ms. Lydia Nabiryo, board member of FIDA Uganda. That's the Women Lawyers Group. You're most welcome, Madam Nabiryo.
Thank you, and good evening, listeners.
Lydia, can you take us through this bill? We had the domestic relations bill. It was turned down. Now we have this bill. Why another bill?
Yeah, thank you. The marriage and divorce bill, like you introduced, was renamed after the withdrawal of the domestic relations bill, and among the views that led to the withdrawal of the bill was the Muslim community, who argued that we cannot put together marriage relating to Christianity and other aspects together with Sharia, because Sharia has its own provisions. So the agreement was that we have a separate law regulating the Christian, Hindu, Baha'i, and customary marriages, which is now the Marriage and Divorce Bill of 2009. The Muslims have a bill which hasn't been yet published, which is the Administration of Muslim Personal Law. That is the law that will regulate the Muslim marriages, property relations, as well as inheritance issues for the Muslims. For this one, we are particularly focusing on regulating marriages relating to civil, Christian, Hindu, Baha'i, as well as customary laws of marriage. This bill is aiming at reforming the laws, among others, and to consolidate the laws that relating to marriage from the different areas such as civil, religious, and customary, so that they are in one set of law, instead of having to look in different and separate pieces of legislation over issues that relate to the same marriage. It also is intended to regulate marital rights as well as duties and responsibilities. The bill, among others, also looks at recognition of property rights during cohabitation. We're not looking at cohabitation as a form of marriage, but we appreciate the fact that people in this country live together, not in recognized forms of marriage, but as a matter of fact, they do stay together, acquire property, and as such, the law should be in a position to regulate such situations. It also looks at circumstances where marriages break down. We agree with the religious leaders that once what God has put together, no man shall put asunder. But there are situations where circumstances dictate that people can no longer stay together as husband and wife, and therefore the law should be in a place to be able to guide such situations instead of waiting for the last or the worst calamity of somebody having to lose life because they can no longer stay together. So among the rights that are regulated in the bill is what parties should be able to get in terms of separation when the marriage can no longer be in a position to continue and subsist. So it is expected that this law will help us achieve social justice, because it is a law that addresses both concerns of men as well as concerns of women. It will also be able to protect the rights of the family members, who include children, among others, in case a relationship is able to have children. And it is intended to be accessible and enforceable in Uganda for people living in Uganda, as well as to be in a position to implement the constitutional provisions which are very clear on the rights of people, equal rights of both men and women in marriage, during marriage and at its dissolution. It also enables us to be able to recognize and adhere to the international obligations to which Uganda is a party, such as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. We are looking at this law as defining a number of aspects regulating marriage, and it defines cohabitation as well, because much as we are saying it's not a form of marriage, we recognize that both men and women live together in a situation of husband and wife, or behaving like they are married. So certain times we have to regulate that, and the law is intended to do that. It also regulates a customary marriage, which is a marriage that is celebrated according to the customs of a community to which one of the parties belong. It may be a man, it may be a woman. In most cases, it is celebrated in accordance with the rights of the women, especially in Uganda, according to our customs. This law also gives us parameters on who you can get married to and who you cannot.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah,
there are some men dating fellow men. Not even animals do that. Go on.
Okay, so this law, first of all, in line with the Constitution, which prohibits same-sex marriages, this law is also prohibiting same-sex marriages.
Really?
So it recognizes just men and women who can get together to and found a family.
And you say that clearly. You don't leave a gray area there.
No. At least that's the intention of the law.
Right.
It also, in addition to saying you can only a man can marry a woman, it also provides for prohibited degrees, meaning that there are people who are taken to be close relatives.
Right.
And on that note, some cultures might be diverse about this, but there are some cultures, most of the cultures in Uganda are very strong about that. That if you're closely related to somebody, a woman and a man are closely related, they shouldn't be married. And these ones include a mother and father, a mother's daughter or father's son, the daughter's son, mother's mother. So, you know, you're looking at a whole.
You can't marry your grandmother.
No. A son's daughter, a daughter's daughter, a sister or a brother, your wife's mother, because that's an in-law, your father's sister, that's your aunt, you can't marry her, your mother's sister, your brother's daughter. So all these are people who are taken to be very close to you, and therefore the law is prohibiting marriages between such close relatives. And there are various issues or formalities that we'll go through, but a marriage can be registered, and whenever, if it's a church marriage, of course it's registered in church. If it's civil marriage, is registered with the Register of Marriages, or the Chief Administrative Officer who normally carries out this function on behalf of the Register of Marriages. If it's a Hindu marriage, it's also registered. If it's a Baha'i marriage, it's also registered. But most importantly, the customary marriages are also registered at the sub-county where these marriages are celebrated.
All right, we'll get more details on that. Of course, we'd like to know there are people who meet in a bar, they have their introduction in one evening and they get married that evening. We'll talk about that, what it means for such couples. Mr. Dan Ngabirano, you are a lecturer of family law at the university. Is this a good law that you're looking at?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think this law has, first of all, I have to observe that has been long overdue. The current laws as we have them, Victorian laws that Uganda inherited from our colonial masters, the British, right at the time Uganda was declared British Protectorate. That dates way back 1894, and of course you have orders in council in 1902 that made laws of Britain applicable in Uganda. Of course, the basic law in Britain has over the years evolved, but our law is still the same. So I think to that extent, really, the law, reform of this law is long overdue. Too, in 1995, we adopted a new constitutional order, which for the first time highlighted equality between sexes, as well as established a strong human rights regime in Chapter 4, which among others provides for freedom from discrimination on basis of sex, and other rights to property, which we enjoy in common, both men and women. So in effect, the reform is long overdue, and two, I think the bill is mere implementing provisions of the Constitution, because like Lydia pointed out, Article 31 of the Constitution entitles both men and women equal rights at marriage, during marriage, and at the time of the resolution of the marriage. And I think to a large extent this is what this bill is trying to enforce. So I think it's a good law.
Well, let's talk about family values versus legislation. Some people argue that all we need are good family values so people don't separate. Are we looking at the right things, or should we be talking about people staying together for life?
The question of family values is really a very relative question. What are family values in the first place? Do we have any common family values? Say, even in Uganda itself, different communities have different family values. But I think I highly suspect when you talk about family values, in this case, you're talking about the sanctity of marriage, right?
Yes.
But of course, that's true. On one hand, we must definitely acknowledge the function of the family. It plays quite a great deal. But at the same time, we have to face the reality of today, where marriages, for several reasons,
could break down.
And of course, not necessarily. It's not necessarily. It's also a question of family values, where you have persons coming together and they cannot be able to sustain the relationship. Would you attribute that to the law, or to? It
could be impatience. A man comes home, he buys a kilo of liver, and the woman fries it badly and says, "Go back to your parents."
Yeah. So I would think in that case, really.
So people, let's get this clear. Many people have said relationships break up over flimsy things. It's not always the big thing. It's normally the small thing.
Yes, that's true, and that's why I beg to differ that the bill is meant to overthrow family values, because the bill is merely providing in the event that there's a breakdown, what happens.
Well, but maybe you should spend more energy, trying to repair.
Yes, of course, the law, I must acknowledge that provides that space for people to repair the marriage, because before a divorce is actually granted under the law, there's some sort of provision. You have to go through certain formalities which give you time. You have to, first of all, seek a separation, and then when you're legally separated, after a period of time, then the marriage, it's called a decree nisi, which is given to you at the time of separation, can be confirmed, and then you get the divorce. So it's really expected that during that time you can repair the marriage.
You can reconcile.
And it's only where you fail to repair the marriage that probably the court will go on to give you the divorce.
Okay, I would like you to take us through that process of divorce, how you go through it. What I know is that the current law, you need to have been separated for 6 months before you can, you allow the time 6 months, you might be able to repair your marriage. Would you like to take us through that?
So first of all, the new law does not differ much from the old law. It's merely consolidating the laws as Lydia observed. And one thing that the new law introduces, which is very significant in terms of dissolution of the marriage, is to introduce one ground for divorce. Previously, there were a couple of grounds, and of which you had to prove adultery as one of the grounds before you. So it had to be adultery or adultery and any other ground.
In the old law, the current
yes,
law.
Which is the current law, yeah.
And the new one that you propose.
But in the new law, it's just one ground, which is irretrievable breakdown of marriage.
Irretrievable break. Of course, that's a whole capsule. You have many causes in there, cruelty and other things.
Yes. So it's just one ground, and you have to show the evidence of irretrievable breakdown of marriage, which is, of course, also it brings back the same grounds, but now in a more refined manner, you could say.
But you put it all in a capsule, leaving it open to interpretation, basically.
No, it's not open to interpretation.
Well, you said irreconcilable differences. Man might say, this woman refuses to polish my shoes every morning.
No,
for 3 years.
Sorry, I have to clarify that it's actually not irreconcilable differences,
what is
but irretrievable breakdown of marriage.
Irretrievable breakdown?
Yes.
Well,
which is, again, the law defines that to be...
okay, well, it's probably the same thing, but maybe you'll give us, I would like you to give us the details of that, the ingredients of this irretrievable breakdown, either the dynamics or the ones written down. Okay,
so the ingredients of this include, of course, adultery, it includes sexual perversion, it includes cruelty, it includes desertion, which should be for a continuous period of at least 2 years without any justifiable cause. Includes a change of religion by one of the parties.
Change of religion?
Yes.
Right.
It includes incestuous adultery. It includes incestuous defilement.
Right.
It includes sexual perversion.
Right.
Which is defined to include bestiality, sodomy, homosexuality, and pornography.
Right. Or even pornography.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's sort of broadened the grounds of divorce, but at the same time, it's also made it quite much easier for the petitioners to be able to seek a divorce order.
All right. Lydia, maybe you can talk to us about this marriage in a bar. You meet on a Friday evening, introduction, wedding tonight. You're man and wife by the time you get home.
Okay,
sometimes they call it cohabitation.
If you talk about a wedding.
Not a wedding. You meet in a bar, you like the dimples, you take her home. She becomes your wife.
Yes.
From there.
Without going to any place. It's
not even the parents, just in the bar, whatever.
Yeah, if you've met in the bar and you're excited about your girlfriend or boyfriend that you've met.
You like the girl's dimples or the man's mustache, whatever.
Yeah, and you decide to stay together. However many years that you spend together, it is referred to as cohabitation. It doesn't become marriage in any way unless you have gone through the formalities for marriage, which the bill clearly highlights for whatever form of marriage that you decide to join. If you decide to go for civil, then there are formalities that you have to go through. If you decide to go for a customary marriages, there are also formalities. If you decided to go to church, there are also formalities. And unless you are able to go through the formalities for each of them that you have chosen, any one of them that you've chosen, then you remain cohabiting. You are boyfriend and girlfriend for even if 30 or 40 years.
The same
Unfortunately, thing. Yes, because the law will not recognize that as a marriage. And this bill is also not intending to recognize that as a marriage.
This is Spectrum listeners on Radio 1 tonight, unpacking the marriage and divorce bill. How different is it from the domestic relations bill that was rejected? We're going for a break. We'll be back. You'll also be able to ask your questions.
Let's show you how to multiply your savings, starting with the cash beneath the mattress to the savings in the bank that aren't making money. Let's turn your savings into somethings with Super Save Reloaded. Super Save Reloaded brings you savings and investment accounts which offer you a sure and predictable way to multiply your savings. For more information about Super Save Reloaded, ask at your nearest Stanbic Bank branch.
Stanbic Bank, moving forward.
Maria!
Hey, Ma, what are you doing here?
I forgot to spread on the other slice, Maria. Take this.
Hey, Mrs. Makumbi, what are you doing here?
You know, Blue Band helps my child grow. That's why I spread on every slice.
Every slice spread with Blue Band is an opportunity for your child to grow. So mums, spread on every slice. Daily Blue Band, daily growth.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Unpacking the marriage and divorce bill. How different is it from the domestic relations bill, which was rejected? Our guest tonight, Mr. Ngabirano, lecturer of family law at Makerere University, also a partner at the Development Law Associates. That's a law firm. We also have Miss Lydia Nabiryo, a board member of FIDA Uganda. That's the Women Lawyers Group. You'll be able to call in shortly. I'll read out the numbers when that time comes. Lydia, talk to us about a breakdown. You've agreed that you want to break apart. What happens then?
Okay. If you agree that you're going to break apart, many things come into play. First of all, there is an issue to start with. If you've had children, then what happens to the custody of those children? Who takes them? Do they go with the father? Do they stay with the mother? And besides the children, if you've acquired property, first of all, this bill is proposing that initially, as you enter into a relationship of marriage, you can agree on a property either that you have acquired before, because many people take long without getting into marriage and they acquire enormous property. So you can agree initially to say, whatever I've acquired now is mine, and you have an agreement. Or you can agree that, you know, I love you so much, and this home where we are going to stay from this day forward is going to be our matrimonial home, so we shall share it. And so that is a list provided for in the bill.
So a man can marry a woman and he says, I come alone. My properties are not part of this deal. But what I earn from there on is shared.
Yes.
Is that fair?
I can't say it is fair because, or not fair, because a woman can also come in with property and they've worked so hard. These days women also work.
Yes. So
you come in there, and if I'm going to come in and I have no option of agreeing whether the property I've toiled so much to work for is going to be shared, at least this bill is fair enough to say we can have that agreed upon at the initial period. I can say I love my husband so
but
much.
Only up to a point.
Yeah, but I can say I don't mind sharing everything with him, and we don't have to agree. We can agree and say, well, from this day on, I've come with all these properties, we shall share.
What's wrong with leaving it automatic? You marry a man, all that he owns, all that he is belongs to you. Since you become one, according to some religions.
Yeah, the law is bringing that because that was a very critical, contentious issue in the domestic relations bill. So this bill now is trying to look at situations where people are not going to look at a marriage as one of those ways of people acquiring property from others.
Right.
Some people, because initially that is how they were looking at it.
You look at the bank balances and then it says a good man.
Yeah, I first look at your bank balances and look at the
man
and say he's a very good man. He's so loving. But actually your area of interest is how much property does he have? Or how much property does she have? So that is what this bill is intending to get away from.
So talk to us about that process. You fill a form saying this is what I have, how many shirts you have, and trousers and belts?
It's not looking at those.
Do you have a schedule of properties to share in the marriage?
It is open. It just says people can agree.
No, let's say how do you actualize it? I tell you the bank account in this bank is. How do you give them a form to fill, for instance?
Because there is no form that the bill is focusing on, but we can agree because they can put down